Yeah, and Susan Del Percio, you know, you just think about this Wall Street Journal editorial he has wrote saying he was emotional, that he said some things he shouldn't have said. Obviously, he made a mention of the Clintons and brought a partisan angle to the hearings. And he says he raised his voice, when you watch the hearing, you can see him raise his voice and make blanket statements in defense of himself like, I like beer. And it just flies in the face of his own words back in 2015 when he talks about what the temperament of a federal judge should be. Listen to Brett Kavanaugh in his own words.
To be a good judge and a good umpire, it's important to have the proper demeanor. Really important, I think, to walk in the other's shoes, whether it be the other litigants, the litigants in the case, the other judges, to understand them, to keep our emotions in check, to be calm amidst the storm. On the bench, to put it in the vernacular, don't be a jerk. I think that's important. To be a good umpire and a good judge, don't be a jerk. Let me run through what I think a judge as umpire means. First, and probably most obviously, not being a political partisan. You have to check those political allegiances at the door when you become a judge. You have to shed them. It's very important at the outset for a judge who wants to be an umpire to avoid any semblance of that partisanship, of that political background, of that background they might have had in a particular line of work. That's the first, probably most fundamental thing for a judge who wants to be an umpire.
I mean, and isn't this part of what they're looking for, what the senators who have to make this decision are looking for, temperament, whether he has it? I mean, when he asked Amy Klobuchar, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who was very politely and very respectfully asking him if he ever drank to the point where he blacked out, obviously getting to the point as to whether or not maybe there was a situation he did not remember. He was defensive. He didn't sound like he was telling the truth. It's not me to say. It just sounded very weak, his answer, his no. And then he throws it back at her so rudely, saying, do you? And again, he says you're not supposed to be a jerk. What was he like at that hearing?
He was a jerk. He was a jerk at that hearing. And I have no problem that he was angry and when he none whatsoever. And I realize what he was accused of, but you have to also look at what he used for his defense. And that was that idea of a conspiracy theory. That was something that showed, and he also used the word, I am damaged. Now, is he so damaged that can he not go forward and be a responsible jurist? And that's my biggest concern is he so damaged from this process that and the bitterness that must go along with it, which is understandable. It means that he should not be the one who's going to be, making the swing decision in this court. He's a representative of what's now dividing our country. When he was nominated, I said he's a typical conservative nominee. And whether and elections have consequences, so we saw it going forward. It is solely his words that concern me and really made me second guess his fitness for the juries.
Fitness.
Yeah.
And, Nina, as you go down the list of attributes that Judge Kavanaugh said that any judge should have, you have to have a proper demeanor, walk in the other's shoes, keep your emotions in check.
If you look
remain calm in the storm. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a political partisan. Avoid any semblance of political partisanship. I'm sure, Nina, are there not most likely people like Chief Justice John Roberts, who has to be very concerned that, in fact, Kavanaugh basically blew through every one of his instructions to those students.
Yeah, he did. And the Chief Justice, and I assume the other members of the court, are sitting there they are truly not very political people. They have ideologies that are conservative and more liberal, but they are not political people. When you have a conversation with them, you're struck by how unpolitical they are. almost foolishly unpolitical, but that's not a bad thing. And the Supreme Court still, up until now, has far exceeded any other institution in terms of confidence of the public. This performance, I think, injected a kind of partisanship and rage, not just anger, but rage into the system that has to be enormously concerning to the people that Judge Kavanaugh would be serving with. And I am sure that they are going a little nuts privately. I've seen a couple of them, and when they look at me, they get sort of what I call Long Island lockjaw. Hello, Nina.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to talk about this. Huh? Help, get me out of here. She's a reporter, and this is awful.
That is so true. I can't. That is good. This is so hard to talk about, and for Ashley Parker, you know, for senators making this decision and the White House pressure they might be feeling, but the pressure from their home states as well. But it's not a question as to whether or not he did it at this point only. I think it's a question of fitness, of temperament, and of some of the other answers that he gave on the record in terms of how he perceives the Constitution and questions he wouldn't answer. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might want to vote against him, even if they're a Republican.
You're right. It's all of those things. And as sort of it became clear that what happened again 30 years ago between him and Dr. Ford was likely not going to be adjudicated with any clarity to anyone's satisfaction, the Democrats began trying to paint him sort of as an angry drunk, someone who was temperamentally unfit. And those questions did, again, turn to temperament and fitness and other answers he did or did not give. And so in that Wall Street Journal op-ed where he didn't, to be clear, it's less that he's apologizing and it's more that he's sort of trying to explain away what has now become a very problematic performance by him. He is trying to alleviate some of those very real concerns that are coming up in the final hours. And very briefly, there's a central irony here, which is that performance raised concerns for voters, for former justices, for senators who have to vote. But the person who loved that most of all, and this points to the danger of performing for that audience of one, was President Trump. The president thinks that was a high point in Judge Kavanaugh's nomination process, that he was fighting for himself, and he loved that angry, emotional, combative, partisan tone. That said, these three key senators did not.
So, Noah, as you know well, this conversation and a lot of the criticism that's come since Kavanaugh's testimony sounds to conservatives and Republicans like goalpost shifting, which is to say that if in the absence of corroborating evidence with Dr. Ford's compelling testimony, we're going to say he's a jerk who threw ice at people in 1985, maybe. Is being a jerk, is his temperament enough to keep him off the court, if that's what you believe?
It's certainly valid, and I agree with Mika that the constitutional questions, the notion that maybe he stretched the Ginsburg rule, a la Ruth Bader, about not answering his judicial philosophy necessarily, and weighing in on cases that had not yet been brought and arguments that had not yet been made. I think those are valid questions, although I don't necessarily agree with them. I do have to disagree with my friend Susan. The notion that these allegations are sufficient to have damaged him alone to the point where he is no longer confirmable is Kafkaesque.
No.
Allow me to finish. The idea, however, that he has been accused of uncorroborated sex crimes, and whether they are prosecutable is a question, but they are crimes, and they will damage him forever. And the notion that they alone are sufficient to disqualify him from taking a seat on the court is a precedent we should resist, because it will be used again.
You're misstating what I said earlier. I believe, actually, and one thing we haven't talked about was Mark Judd was supposed to fix this all, remember? He was supposed to be interviewed. This was going to be the witness that was going to take down Kavanaugh. Obviously, that didn't happen. I think he was right. I understand the Judge Kavanaugh's frustration in that testimony. It wasn't that he was angry that bothered me. It's what he chose and took the political angle to double down in it, and he is and to be so angry and to get so into the political fray on it, and then on top of that, the temperament he showed in the hearing when he was answering questions. He should be above that. And I think that that anger, and I think that this whole process is something that really destroyed a part of him, and it's a part that I think will haunt him for a long time, and it could be a big problem for him on the bench.
And Noah, I agree with you that uncorroborated allegations of and by themselves can't be disqualifying for a Republican or for a Democrat. I certainly agree with you there. But if you let's just look at what the judge said in that speech that we played in 2015, the guidelines to be an effective judge. I could go down every one of them again. He failed every one of those tests. And there are two that really stick out to me. One, keep your emotions in check, one. And two, remain calm in the storm. Yes, he was in a storm. And he will most likely, if he goes on the court and serves for 30 years, be in several other storms. But didn't you find his response lacking? Didn't you find, at least in that character test, Brett Kavanaugh failing his own test in such a way that should cause all of us great concern?
I thought the invocation of partisanness, partisan rancor, the invocation of the idea that people are opposing him to seek some form of revenge for the Clintons unseemly and untoward, and also something that has imperiled his nomination. I also, as I said earlier, believe that if he had not taken that course, that the audience of one for whom we say this has been a perilous process would have pulled his nomination. I don't think Republicans would have rallied to him as we have seen. And the Republicans who have rallied to him include Never Trump Republicans, MAGA hat-wearing Republicans. It's across the political spectrum. We have not seen this kind of engagement, and it's genuine. It is not partisan. It is a real perception that there has been a wrong here. The protestations of the chief notwithstanding, the American Bar Association has recommended him highly. He has a paper trail a mile long. He has demonstrated his fitness for the bench, and his recommendation comes reportedly from Justice Kennedy himself. So we have to weigh this statement, one statement, against a career that has been otherwise exemplary.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.